Over the course of 2020 at St Stephen's Church, we're holding a series of events to mark the 6th centenary of the death of Richard Caister, who was a significant incumbent in the history of this parish. One thing we hadn't planned on doing was reflecting on the fact that Richard Caister's lifetime was through a period of plague across Europe and in England. But events of the recent months have caused us to want to reflect on that. And so we've turned to Richard Caister's prayer to understand what he can tell us about the reality of suffering and also the goodness of God in Jesus Christ.
We don't know the exact time or place of Richard's birth, but it will have been within the 1360s, and it's likely to have been within Norfolk. He returned certainly to Norfolk to his first parish in Sedgeford near King's Lynn. And in fact, it was the Grey Friars Chronicle written in King's Lynn that gives most of the information about the way in which Black Death, or Great Pestilence as it was called, arrived in Britain in 1348. At that time, the population of London was 70,000 and Norwich 12,000. And during the plague, the death toll in London was about 40,000 people, halving the population of London. It was a global pandemic, and the most fatal recorded in human history, in which 75 to 200 million people died in Eurasia and Northern Africa, peaking between 1347 and 1351, and not disappearing completely until the 17th century. But being new at the time that Richard, a new horror at the time that Richard was born. And there is a slight chance that he died in 1420 as a result of a plague peak in Norfolk at that time. That's total speculation, but what we do know for sure was that it will have been a backdrop to his ministry and life.
In one way or another, Richard Caister's life and ministry would have been marked by the presence of the plague. In his famous poem and prayer, he writes a little bit about the suffering of Jesus and how the suffering of Jesus intersects with our own experience of suffering. And he writes these words. These are some extracted verses from his poem. Jesus, for thy wounds smirch, of feet, of side, of hands too, thou make me meek and low of heart, and thee to love as I should do. Jesus, for thy bitter wounds, that went to thine heart straight, for sin has my heart bound, thy blessed blood redeems me. Jesus, grant me mine asking, patience in my disease, that I should make no grumbling, in which I should thee displease. Richard Caister's poem speaks about the reality of Jesus' sufferings and how through his sufferings we are healed, we are redeemed. And his prayer also finishes there in that third verse with him making a request to Jesus. As the writer of the letter to the Hebrews put it, Jesus is the one who shared in our sufferings, so he can sympathize with us. And Richard Caister makes his appeal to Jesus, who he knows has borne sufferings just as he does, and who can sympathize with him in them.
We didn't expect to be considering this aspect of the world in which Richard Caister lived. and served at St. Stephen's between 1402 and 1420. And it's extraordinary that this man still has something to say to us, to encourage us to pray and to look to Jesus. It makes his prayer poignant at this time.